So the things that I'm going to dive into, we're going to talk about macros and menopause because macronutrients tends to be one of the areas of education that I really do focus on with my clients the most, where there's the most misunderstanding around macronutrients. And let's just say calorie counting, and then what can equate to weight loss from there, certainly after menopause, and then exercise, the exercise formula that really it's an important one. It's an easy one. It will probably make you very, very happy once we talk about it. It's a little different from how we approach things maybe back in the 80s and 90s and even the early 2000s. And then there are some habits too that affect us. And these habits are just habits, right? I mean, they're things that as we get older, we have our own responsibilities. They're kind of behaviors that we yield to. But I find that these are the habits that are most persistent with all of my clients. And so I'm going to talk about those three subjects. As you can see, like it's 1:06 right now. At Central Time, I'm going to breeze through these, but I'm probably going to spend most of the time on the nutrition section. So that's the first section. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave it in the chat. I will be more than happy to address that with you. And again, if you want to stick around afterward, please do so. I do have a new group training program, a new 12-week group coaching program starting on January 6th called Healthy, Happy Hormones. It's really all about this, and it involves 1 week group coaching, which is lovely, especially if you want to be around highly motivated women who are interested in improving their health. It's all about nutrition, fitness, habits. Those are the three core areas of this program. It's a little bit different from previous programs if you participated in one of those with me. Again, that starts January 6th. So I will send some information to you on that. In fact, I'll link it a little bit later on to just get on the wait list. All right. So let's talk about macronutrients. When it comes to macronutrients, we know what they are. There are three macronutrients that we all eat all the time: protein, carbohydrate, and fat. Of those three macronutrients, the one that I perceive based on my client's conversation with me that is seen as the most valuable and the safest is protein. That protein is going to be where it's at for all women. Now, I agree that protein is a very important macronutrient. Women, especially menopausal women, need protein. We need protein in our diet, whether you're perimenopausal, menopausal, you could be, at early stages of life too, you need protein in your diet. Fat kind of comes second in terms of the fear of consuming fat, because back in the 80s, if you remember, there was a big fear of fat, even in the 90s, that if you ate fat, you would get fat. I think most of us understand now that that's not true. And then we have carbohydrates, and carbohydrates have kind of garnered this reputation of a fat accumulating macronutrient because of the effects that carbohydrates have on our body through the influence that this carbohydrate has on insulin. And insulin, for all intents and purposes, is our fat storage hormone. From my vantage point, it's a blood sugar regulator. Now, what I really want to dive into here are the carbohydrates. I will touch base a little bit on the protein and the fat and why that's important and the type of protein and fat that you should be getting in your diet. But when it comes to carbohydrates, let's break this up into two different pools. Let's call one group ultra-processed carbohydrates, in fact, all ultra-processed foods, and then the unrefined version. When it comes to the fat storage properties of carbohydrates, they are almost exclusively in this ultra-processed group. When you go to the store and you buy a bag of chips, cookies, a coffee drink that's super sugary, you're probably getting garbage protein and garbage fat in that too, but you're also getting garbage carbohydrates. So this ultra processed food is causing a big hormonal disruption within your body. This unrefined version over here of carbohydrates that we have, we're talking about vegetables first and foremost, fruits, we're talking about whole grains, beans, legumes, foods of that nature that don't necessarily have the ability to be, clothed in very sexy advertising or packaging because they're just what they are. You're talking about broccoli, you're talking about Brussels sprouts, apples, kiwi. You get what you get. And there's not a lot of marketing that needs to go behind these foods. But when you go to the ultra processed side, oftentimes you have foods that are health washed In other words, they're made to sound much healthier than what they really are. They might have words on the label that say low fat, high fiber, low sugar, good for you, heart healthy. And in fact, these can have they don't have a lot of value to them at all. I always like to give the example that crackers that have flax seeds on them are simply just crackers that have a healthy ingredient on top that your body can't absorb anyway. It doesn't make the cracker any healthier by having something healthy on top of it. It really doesn't affect the value of that product. So it's really important that we scrutinize over the foods that we're eating, period. But what I want to talk about is the value and the importance of getting more carbohydrates in your diet and how to do that. So in order to really be motivated to want to eat carbohydrates and feel good about it and trust that your weight will not be influenced in the worst way, it will only get better if you eat more quality carbohydrates. And you can ask any one of my clients, where I put somewhere in between 45 and 65% of their meal plans is carbohydrates, and it varies. Women going through menopause should get, and postmenopausal women should consume roughly that percentage of carbohydrates every single day. The remainder can be reserved for protein and for fat, but that 45 to 65%, and it doesn't have to be exact science every single day, should come from high quality carbohydrates each and every day. So why is that so important for us? And what value does that bring us, certainly as we're going through menopause? When we consume high quality carbohydrates, like what I've just talked about, the vegetables, the fruits, the legumes, beans, the whole grains, we're consuming fiber. You can't get fiber from fat. You're not going to get fiber from protein. You're only going to be getting high quality fiber from those high quality carbohydrates. There are plenty of carbohydrates that are out there that don't contain fiber. And those would be like the crackers, the white breads, the pastas, those types of carbohydrates. But consuming high quality carbohydrates is going to give you a bevy of fiber. Now, that fiber is especially important to us as we go through menopause because it improves our body's response to insulin. It decreases the likelihood that we are going to become insulin resistant. I can't stress this enough, how important this is for us women to understand. We improve our insulin sensitivity and we decrease the likelihood of becoming insulin resistant. Why is this so important? Well, there are two very good reasons. One is you influence blood sugars in a negative way. When we go through menopause, our insulin is less efficient at doing its job. And this is because estrogen does a wonderful job at buffering blood sugar levels. But when we go through menopause, insulin's much less efficient at this job. So it can't move the sugar molecules out of your blood and put them to where they need to go. It doesn't do it as efficiently as it should. So when we have other helpers that we can eat, including high fiber foods, we slow the digestive time and we help to improve our body's insulin sensitivity. Now that keeps blood sugars in check. If blood sugars were high too often, your insulin that's grabbing onto the sugar molecules is going to park the sugar molecules typically right in the belly area. So if you're dealing with belly fat right now, it would be a really smart idea to start bumping up your carbohydrates, your high quality carbohydrates, and getting more fiber in your diet so you slow down your digestion. So those sugar molecules can get parked to where they need to go. And that insulin isn't spiking up as high in response to blood sugar spike. Does that make sense? So blood sugars spike, insulin chases after it. Insulin pulls blood sugars down out of your blood. That's insulin's job. That's what keeps you alive. Now, the other consequence of having constantly high blood sugar levels is that it ends up having a cardiac effect on you. You don't want to hurt your heart. Women, before we go through menopause, now again, this is estrogen, right? Estrogen does so many things. And we're talking specifically about the type of estrogen that is released from your ovaries called estradiol. Estrogen is very helpful for our heart. And when we don't have that helpfulness of estrogen, our heart health, where if we were standing side by side with men at the age of, let's say, 40, a man's cardiovascular risk is going to be significantly higher than a woman's, just by the nature of being a man. Now, a woman goes through menopause, our heart health risk rises significantly. We leapfrog over the cardiac risk of men. So these carbohydrates alone could be very beneficial for you. The other very important thing is that these high quality carbohydrates are going to be largely anti-inflammatory. Okay, so anti-inflammatory foods is going to be the backbone of every single one of my meal plans. And it is the reason why I get the great results I do with my clients. There's a lot of coaching that goes into it. There's a lot of exercise routine that goes into it. There's a lot of habit formation that goes into it. But when it comes to the things that my clients can do on their own is I deliver them the meal plans. They follow the meal plans. They're eating anti-inflammatory, a lot of carbohydrates, healthy fats, healthy protein, and the inflammation that was existing in their body diminishes, makes weight loss so much easier. If you have a lot of inflammation in your body right now, it's going to be very difficult for you to lose weight unless you start shifting things in your diet. So I don't want you to feel bad about how you're eating right now. I don't want you to feel guilty if you're someone who, tends to eat a lot of protein or fat. What I want you to do is really look at the quality of the foods that you're eating. That would be a good place for you to start. How can you integrate then 25 to 30 grams of carbohydrates in your diet while maintaining healthy protein and healthy fat? So protein is going to be pretty easy. It's going to come in the form of lean proteins, chicken, fish, turkey, legumes are going to be good sources of protein. And then the fat is going to come in the form of high quality monounsaturated fats. High quality monounsaturated fats would be things like extra virgin olive oil, would be things like avocado oil, avocados, nuts, seeds, foods of that nature are going to be very important for you. And I talk more about the quality of fat and why it's so important for women to get high quality fat in their diet after menopause. Talk more about that in group coaching. I'm not going to dive into that too much right now. I want to stick with the myths, but do not be afraid to eat carbohydrates. Don't think that the apple, the banana, the carrots that you had in your salad, what else can I think of here? That the beans that you had on your salad are going to negatively impact you on the scale. I mean, unless there's some digestive concern you have where you can't eat those foods, you will be just fine and you will benefit from them. Okay, it's very important. So please try to remember that. And if you have any questions about carbohydrates, that myth, reach out to me. I'd love to talk to you about it. We're going to move on to exercise. This was myth number 2. And this is another one that is kind of in line with the macronutrient syndrome that I find a lot of people have. We count a lot. We are very in tune with the amount of calories a lot of us are, or the amount of macronutrients that we consume. And it's kind of hard place to live because you're in your head, you're counting all the time. I prefer to be very free with what I eat, just trusting that the foods that I'm eating are high quality foods. I think I would go nuts if I had to count everything. The same is true for the amount of calories that I burn. This is not something that I keep a close eye on at all. When it comes to exercise, now generationally speaking, I think I might be able to speak for all of us. I don't know. You might have been more enlightened at a younger age, but when it comes to exercise, the big thing, and I feel like this persists now, even with younger generations, is that harder is better. Burning more calories is going to get you further. If you burn more calories, you're going to lose weight faster. That's BS. That is just bogus. Burning more calories is not necessarily going to help you lose more weight, certainly not belly fat. Working out harder is not always better. Yeah, working out hard once in a while, very prescribed workouts, knowing exactly what you're doing could really benefit you. And, those are the things that we tend to, harder is better, burning more calories, longer is better. Try to let go of some of that. Now, I love working out. I absolutely love working out. I get a lot of joy from it, and it makes the quality of my life much better than what it would be if I weren't working out. But my workouts and the workouts that I highly recommend that you focus on should not be as complicated. So I want to try to make things as simple as possible for you. If you were one of my clients, you would be getting workouts from me regularly. That's usually what I do for most of my clients. I send them workouts and tell them exactly what they should be doing, and it helps to get results. And this is what is part of the program too. But if you are just wondering what you need to do to get going, you don't want to reinvent the wheel, you don't want to join a big gym, you need to focus on moving your body in a place called zone 2. Now, zone 2 is really just giving your body a little bit of effort. It's that conversational type of exercise. So if you were to go for a jog right now, zone 2 would be roughly 60% of the maximum heart rate, which is a pretty easy pace. You'd be surprised. So if you were to go for a jog right now, It would be the jog that you would go on where you could talk to your friend if your friend were running next to you. And it doesn't matter how slow you're going. Doesn't matter how slow you're going. You should be running very slow. It should be easy. It should be comfortable. It should be a zone 2 exercise. Now, I'm using running as an example. There are a lot of different things that you can do. And I'm only talking about cardiovascular exercise right now. But zone 2 cardiovascular exercise is really important for women going through menopause. And when I say zone 2, again, I mean very easy cardiovascular exercise that gets your heart rate up, but not too high. And the reason is when we push our heart rate up a little bit higher and we feel like I can only do this for 10 or 15 more minutes, we're elevating our cortisol levels. And when we women, just before, during, and after menopause, start spiking our cortisol levels, we will store more belly fat. And the reason that this happens, no matter how many calories you burn, you could be storing more belly fat because when cortisol levels rise, your liver, which is your body's sugar warehouse, releases sugar in response to the stress that cortisol is signaling to your body. And that's just something that cortisol does naturally. Cortisol taps your liver, knocks on your liver's door and says, hey, I'm perceiving a threat in this body. This body is under duress. Can you let out some sugar so I can run away from this bad situation? Your body doesn't distinguish stress. It doesn't distinguish whether your body's being, whether you're being chased by a bear or whether you are just exerting yourself a little too hard during a workout. So if you're exerting yourself a little too hard for a workout, you've just flooded your body with a little bit more sugar. Now, what happens knowing what you know now with insulin? So you have more sugar in your blood. So now insulin comes in to grab that sugar and pulls it down and packs it potentially in your belly area. So while the cardiovascular exercise that you were doing when you were pushing yourself too hard might have been good for your heart, I don't disagree with that. I find that hard to argue with. I think it could be very good for your heart. It's just going to affect you if your goal is to really manage your weight, to lose visceral belly fat. Focus on that zone 2 cardiovascular training. Now, that should be done about 80% of the time. So when you do push yourself very, very hard, it should be infrequent, maybe once a week. And that's going to be an important thing for you to do. And we can talk more about that later. That's something I discuss ad nauseum actually in group coaching. The other thing to remember is you do need to strength train. Strength training is really important for you to do. So if you're not currently strength training, you can follow up with me. You can email me. I can send you a sample workout that might help get you going. But that's definitely an area for you to consider getting going with because strength training after menopause is absolutely important to prevent muscle loss and all the things that tend to happen as we get older and accelerates after menopause. So low intensity cardiovascular activity is very important. Very infrequent, high intensity activity is good too, but strength training as well. So those are the 3 things. And let me tell you right now, a lot of people wonder if I lift weights, if I strength train, am I going to end up bulking up? Am I going to gain weight? That doesn't happen. You'd have to intentionally lift extremely high weights for that to happen with a lot of intention of bulking up. It simply doesn't happen just by trying to maintain good muscle strength and tone. So that is the second myth that I wanted to extinguish as much as possible. And the last one that I want to talk about are the habits. Now I'm going to go through these fairly quickly, but these are the habits that tend to persist with my clients, almost every single one of them. And we work through them and it makes a big difference. So the first one is eating too late at night. So eating too late at night, eating 2 to 3 hours before bed, you miss out on the benefit of human growth hormone that's released from your brain when you sleep at night, primarily. When you sleep at night, your brain releases a hormone called human growth hormone, and that's released at the front end of every one of your sleep cycles, especially that very first sleep cycle. So the first 90 minutes or so of sleep. The reason that that hormone doesn't get released, it gets blocked, is because when you eat too close to bed, your blood sugar levels rise. When your blood sugar levels rise, your insulin has to come up to grab the sugar that's in your blood. Insulin trumps human growth hormone. So insulin gets in the way of your HGH. And that HGH, that human growth hormone, is absolutely critical for your body's fat metabolism. It helps with insulin regulation. It helps your skin look really good. It helps all of these wonderful processes in your body. And it's a really valuable hormone, but eating too late at night can really disrupt that. So that's one thing. And so the solution there is really just pump the brakes on the kitchen 2 to 3 hours before bed. So if you're eating very late at night, let's say you can't help but eat late at night, it's a late night dinner or something like that, try to eat a little bit lighter. That's usually my recommendation. Don't eat something that's so heavy really close to bed. More often than not, it's not going to be a chronic thing for most people. It might be an occasional dinner out. If it's occasional every now and then, don't even worry about it. Try to be as consistent as possible with shutting down the kitchen 2 to 3 hours before bed. The second bad habit that a lot of women tend to succumb to as we get older is caffeine consumption. And this is younger generations too, but caffeine consumption, when you consume caffeine after 9 o'clock, your body's natural cortisol level rises about an hour and a half after you wake up, an hour and a half after you wake up. Your cortisol levels should be at their peak. After that, your cortisol levels fall. As the day moves on, cortisol levels come to their lowest point. As cortisol comes to its lowest point, melatonin, your sleep hormone, starts to come up. But let's say you have a big cup of coffee or a big cup of black tea at 3 or 4 in the afternoon. You've artificially elevated your cortisol levels. Now, what happens? We talked about this with the exercise, with exercising too hard. When you elevate your cortisol levels, your body perceives stress. So even though you may have just had a black cup of coffee that has no calories in it at all, you've just elevated your cortisol levels. Now, cortisol does the same thing as it did when you stressed yourself out when you were exercising too hard. It shouts out to your liver, hey, can you please release sugar? I need that so I can get out of this stressful situation. Now you've just infused your blood with sugar, and now insulin has to come in and do its job and pull it down. So this is the cycle that we kind of get into. So my recommendation, now I have plenty of clients that are like, Tracy, I believe what you are saying. There is no way I can not drink coffee at 11 o'clock. It's my routine. I have to drink coffee at 11 o'clock. I usually say, I want to work with my clients. I usually say, okay, see what happens. See how your body responds to all of this, but please don't drink it later in the day. Please do not drink it later in the day. Don't drink it at 3, 4 in the afternoon. It really does. You don't have to feel that stress, by the way. When your cortisol levels rise because of a cup of coffee, you don't necessarily feel the cortisol rise. You won't feel stressed. But one thing that can happen after you have a cup of coffee, and pay attention to this in the morning time too, is if your blood sugar levels come up because that cortisol level came up, so then your liver released the sugar, pay attention to how soon you feel hungry after you have that caffeine. It might be interesting. Some people are more sensitive to it than others. As we get older, over the age of 40, our metabolism of caffeine changes a little bit. So you might have noticed that now after a cup of coffee, you feel hungrier sooner. It's different for everyone, but that in particular, pay attention to that because that could be a signal coming from your hormones, specifically insulin and cortisol, letting you know that things aren't working the way that they were. Regardless, drinking caffeine too late in the day is never a good idea. So that's habit number 2. Habit number 3. I had to rank these because my habits, there are so many habits that we tend to fall prey to. Habit number 3 is really emotional eating. Now, emotional eating doesn't necessarily mean that you're eating because you're sad. It could be because you're happy. It could be because you're bored, but it's the condimental eating is what I like to call it. It's walking by somebody's desk and grabbing a handful of M&Ms when you're feeling stressed. It's adding a little bit more to your plate just because you want to have something else there because you think it's fun. I've heard people describe this as, well, it's more fun to eat this way. So you're attaching emotion to it. And so when you start attaching emotion to foods, and it doesn't take a lot to tip the scales, quite literally, when you start eating those foods, when it's emotionally based, those foods tend to be pro-inflammatory. I mean, some people might reach for an apple, which is a great thing to do if you're trying to curb that emotional eating. Reach for unrefined foods, but more often than not, it's going to be a refined carbohydrate that's going to go right to our dopamine receptors, which is our feel-good neurotransmitter slash hormone. That's going to give us that feeling of, okay, now this feels good. I want to keep eating these chips. I want to keep eating this candy. I want that ice cream. That's not only is that probably part of a little bit of a sugar addiction, but it's also, a way to pacify ourselves. So what I would recommend is, first of all, just become aware of it. Just become aware of it and figure out, okay, is this a problem in my life, or is this just something that I do every now and then? I'm a big person on, if it's an every now and then kind of a thing, don't worry about it. But if it happens each and every day, that's something that you want to be more aware of. So just start paying attention to that. All right. So just to recap very quickly, the three myths around macronutrients, the fear of carbohydrates. You're going to get this in an email tomorrow. This whole presentation is going to come in an email tomorrow. The fear of eating carbohydrates. I hope I established that carbohydrates are good for you. It's really the type of carbohydrates that's important that you eat. The second, it comes down to exercise. When you're exercising too hard, especially if you're in your late 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, you do not need to be working out that hard. You should be working out in zone. In fact, all athletes in general, you'd be amazed that some of the best world-class athletes are operating at that zone 2 level because it's more optimal for you. It also helps with metabolic flexibility, right? Metabolic flexibility, your body's more likely to burn fat for fuel. You want that. That's what you want. So that, harder is better, and burning more calories will get you places further in terms of losing weight. Not true. Focus on that gentle cardiovascular exercise that gets your heart rate up, but not too high. A little bit of high intensity exercise and strength training. And the third and final is really, just the habits. Those habits that we tend to think that drinking coffee later on in the day is going to be good for us because it boosts our. I've heard people say that it boosts our metabolism. It's not going to help your metabolism in any noticeable way. And that eating late at night is a big one too, because I've heard a lot of people recently say that there are certain diets that promote eating late at night because it's going to help keep your metabolism running throughout the night. Ugh, it's going to have the opposite effect just because it interferes with human growth hormone, which is largely responsible for regulating your metabolism. Now, again, group coaching starts with me this is a super condensed little bit of information, but group coaching starts on January 6th. I would love to see you there. If you pre-register now, you'll get 30% off in the new year. It's a 12-week program, begins January, ends in March. Really informative, super focused on learning from it. Again, it's a little bit different from how I did it before. So if you were with me with a group coaching program in the past, this is very different. It's much more focused on these methods and much more focused on getting you to pay attention to your hormones specifically through menopause and beyond.